So this week we read a little bit about cultural analytics and data mining. Let's start with cultural analytics, and we can just begin with what our text says about it. And then I'd like to look at some examples that I didn't ask you to read or explore for today, but which we can look at quickly and kind of use them to make this discussion a little more concrete. Because as you will have noticed by now, our textbook tends to be kind of abstract because it's trying to give general descriptions that would apply to a lot of examples. So we'll start with those and then get a little more specific. The field of cultural analytics has emerged over the past few years, utilizing the tools of high-end computational analysis and data visualization to dissect large-scale cultural data sets. So this is, a perfect example of digital humanities, right? It's using computers um, and data visualization to go after cultural artifacts that exist in large collections. And as they go on to say, it can be, it can be all sorts of things. It can be a bunch of films. Um, it can be, the complete works of John Milton, the British poet. It can be real-time flows such as tweets or SMS text messages. It can be all kinds of stuff, right? So the first thing to see about it is that it doesn't apply exclusively to the kinds of typical texts that you think of in the humanities, but to an enlarged, a sort of there's like a larger tent of stuff that can be included, which includes, all kinds of stuff that you might think of as cultural, not in the sense of kind of high culture, but just in the kind of anthropological sense of culture, like everything we do, right? Um, that's what they say here. Cultural analytics also broadens the canon of objects and cultural material under consideration by humanities scholars. Uh, Traditionally thought of cultural objects are now digitized, marked up, accessible, and shareable in multiple formats and a variety of platforms. While born, so that would be like, paintings and poems and et cetera, right? Um, sculptures and short stories and artsy photography and all that kind of stuff that you would ordinarily be studying in courses in the humanities. Well, born or the fine arts, while born digital objects, tweets, blogs, videos, web pages, music, maps, photographs, hypermedia artifacts that combine different types of media types provide data for analysis and populate new forms of knowledge creation. The data of cultural analytics are exponentially expanding in terms of volume, right? Data type, production, everything. So more stuff count, and to translate this, more stuff counts as worthy of humanist inquiry. There's more of it, and our capacity to subject it to analysis or to mine it for patterns is growing, right? So that's the kind of headline. Um, we don't have to worry too much about aggregation, but that's the other big word in this section. Aggregation of large scale amounts of information allows data or files to be merged and then outputted into displays that highlight distinctive features, such as data points, clusters, and trends. I'll give you an example of that in a minute. I don't feel like they give you super, I mean, uh, network traffic, money flows, resource depletion. I mean, these feel like examples from the social sciences. So over here in the cultural analytics lab that we're going to look at in a second, there are some more humanities-like examples of aggregation that I think are useful. But let's quickly, while we're looking at our textbook, let's quickly touch on data mining, right? So because we're talking about this week, cultural analytics, aggregation, and data mining. Finally, and we've talked about data mining a little already. Finally, data mining is a term that covers a host of techniques for analyzing digital material by parameterizing some feature of information and extracting it. So we're going to talk about that in particular. You know, we'll use Google Ngram as an example of that, even though it has some imperfections. And the Vogue Digital Humanities Project is another example of this for us to think about. This means that any element of a file or collection of files that can be given explicit specifications or parameters can be extracted from those files for analysis. And then of course you have to visualize it. Once you have a pile of stuff that you're going to analyze, or what in what we're calling a corpus, and then you have a set of questions you're going to ask, or a query, um, then you can do some data mining. And once you get the data, the next step is to visualize it, right? So which is going to be the next piece we read about later. But so let's pivot from this description in our textbook to some examples first of cultural analytics. So Lev Manovich has been a kind of influential and pioneering figure in the English-speaking world on this stuff. And I mean, he seems to be doing less now than he was a few years ago. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with him, but he was really active up until about 4 years ago. Um, and I think he had a big book come out in 2020 on cultural analytics. But his page and his lab are still interesting to look at. So if you click this link, you're going to end up here. Um, and you can just sort of look down through these projects. And these projects are going to sort of give you some examples of visualization, right? So this one, for example, the Museum of Modern Art Photography Collection. I mean, we can just glance at this to get a feel for visualization. So these are all images of photographs, 18,000, almost 19,000 photographs from the Museum of Modern Art Photography Collection, 1837 through 2012. And what this is doing is here's the center, right? And the distance that one of these little pictures is from the center is an expression of its year of creation. So all the way out here at the furthest point in the circle are the most recent, and so on, right? And then the degree of a photograph's placement in the circle is determined by its average brightness, which you can see starting here, right? And in a way, this design has a little bit of the problem of the background, but they're seeking a neutral background. But right here, the darkest photographs are here, and as they go this way, as they arrange this way, they're brighter and brighter and brighter. So I mean, that's a kind of an interesting way of arranging the photograph. I mean, does it tell us something? I don't know. So these are sort of design questions. Um, I'm more interested in a project. So if you're on the cultural analytics page and you go to projects, I mean, these are featured projects, but there's all kinds of projects. If you go to projects, you can look at a bunch of different ones. Um, this one's kind of interesting. This is a map of um, images shared on Twitter in 2017. And of course, what it shows you is, I think, what you would probably guess, which is that the people who are the most, continuously sharing images of themselves actually represent a certain quite privileged proportion of the world's population. So it's most intense in the most developed economies. Um, in the kind of most prosperous states, with the exception of China, and that has something to do with the date at which this project was, the data was taken from. There's an interesting project, but the one that I thought we could look at more closely is this one called Selfie City, 2014 to 15. And what I like about this is it's going to allow us to explore a lot of angles that of cultural analytics projects. So first of all, it's not the collected works of John Milton. That is to say, it's not grabbing something out of the kind of traditional canon of humanities texts and artifacts. Instead, it's culture in that anthropological sense. It's people's selfies, right? And so if we read the description of it, I'll just make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. SelfieCity.net investigates selfies using a mix of theoretic, artistic, and quantitative methods. It presents analysis and interactive visualizations of 3,200 single selfie photos from Instagram shared December, early December 2013 in these 5 large cities: Bangkok, Berlin, Moscow, New York, and Sao Paulo. All right, so you have, South America, North America, West Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia represented. And so then if we go to, so you have these kind of like already you see some cool elements of design, like women, men, and mood, and how the pictures are distributed. So in Bangkok, most of the selfies by women they would seem to express a positive mood. And the same is true of men, right? And as the mood gets, as it trails off from being happy, there are fewer and fewer of them, right? And that project, that is seems to be characteristic of all of them, right? And with the most ecstatic, the most ecstatically delighted selfies being those uh, posted or shared by women in Sao Paulo. But you can see that characteristic kind of shape is in all of them. The place where it's the most muted is in Moscow. Perhaps this is a reflection of the fact that it's a little less, there's a little less delight to be enjoyed in Russia compared with these other states. Not sure. But anyway, if you go to, all right, so maybe what we should do is click on this, right? No, not that one. I'm sorry. What I want is I want to go to the project itself. Yeah. So if we click on this, right? I guess this is the one I want. So what this is going to let us do is uh, it's going to let us explore or query the corpus of selfies. So here they are, right? Here, there's a whole bunch of them. You could look at them individually. Um, and these little interfaces right here give us a set of constraints that we can use to explore um, and do our cultural analytics. So suppose what we wanted to, I mean, of course, 3,200 selfies, even it might sound like a lot, but it's a tiny number. So you have to think of this as a kind of illustration of the sort of thing that can be done. Though, how representative it is in general, I think is an open question. But suppose we wanted to know, I don't know, we want to look at people who are looking up in the pictures and we want to see people whose heads are tilted to the left and their eyes are open and they're not wearing glasses. They're not very many of them, right? So you see how this could be done. Or maybe we don't care how they're looking. Maybe what we want is we want to look at people who are not angry and who are happy. Look at that, only one. Look at him, right? Or I guess we're still stuck with that tilt. So as we enlarge the tilt of the face, we're going to get more of them. As we enlarge this domain, we're going to get more faces. As we enlarge how happy they can be, we're going to get more faces. We can go back and forth between men and women. We can change our city. Oh, I like that one. Anyway, so what does this do? I mean, this in a sense, this is very basic, but this is a set of tools that is allowing us to compare a cultural artifact, the pictures we take and share of ourselves, right? And it's allowing us to break that data down by age, by gender, by the city of origin, the place where these people live, the pose, features of their pose, which is kind of an interesting choice, but I suppose since it's a picture of a face, why not, right? Whether their eyes are open or closed, the mouth is open and closed, do they have glasses, and their mood. And you can imagine all kinds of other things, right, that you might add. And they would all be ways of probing the corpus of images and asking questions about it, right? If we go back to the project page and go back to Selfie City, um, let's see. It actually did quite well. Top 12 best data visualizations of all time. It won, right? Um, I mean, I think for me, the most interesting thing about it is this, which you know invites more questions. Like particularly the similarity of these graphs gets you thinking like that these populations have got to have things in common, right? Because the rate at which they are sharing similar images, um, is quite striking, right? So, um, you can read their findings, like what they think this data shows. People take less selfies than often assumed. Women do it more. Is it young people who do it? Um, where are people the happiest? I mean, that might be an interesting question, right? I suppose you also have to distinguish between the fact that a person is smiling in a photograph and the idea that they're happy. I mean, everyone can smile, and or it would seem, but it's not the same thing to be happy, right? So there are some assumptions here. But anyway, this is, I think, an interesting case um, of a cultural analytics project that uses computation, and it uses data mining to ask questions about a large corpus of cultural artifacts, and then it uses visualization to present that information to us. There are others here that you can explore. Um, and some of them are more about, here's one about 1 million manga pages. Um, they're about all kinds of different things. So there's one thing to sort of think about in terms of cultural analytics, one instance of how it works. I also, because Lev Manovich was the kind of presiding spirit of that lab, and that lab has sort of petered out and doesn't seem to be doing much in the last couple of years. I linked to the Journal of Cultural Analytics. That thing is alive and well. And so if you click on it, you'll come over here. And this is a very interesting thing. And this, like the Lev Manovich's lab, this shows you the kind of breadth of cultural analytics in terms of the kinds of questions, the wide range of questions that it asks, the wide scope of cultural artifacts that it considers. So, for instance, the top article right now is, quote, authentic and amazing, end quote. Authenticity as an evaluative category in online, consumer restaurant reviews. So I don't know, it's Friday night, you're hanging out with some people, you get hungry, you look for a restaurant nearby, and you start reading some reviews, right? And so those reviews you could put them all together, and then they would constitute a corpus of textual data that we could ask questions about. And so one of the questions we could ask is like, how do people express their approval of a restaurant? What words do they use? Apparently, it turns out that the words authentic and amazing are key words in the ways that, in the language people use to express approval for restaurants. And then, so this is a study that tries to understand why that is. I mean, it's sort of a strange idea, isn't it? In the sense that if I'm hungry, I'm not necessarily hungry for authenticity, you know? So, I mean, I can understand amazing because it's one of those sort of vague words of approval, but authenticity is an interesting choice. What does it mean? It immediately raises the possibility that when someone is writing a review, they might be more interested in giving information about themselves than they are in giving information about a restaurant. Because if I write a review in which I praise a restaurant as authentic, um, you may say, well, he's telling me that I'll find real Indian food, let's say, and not some kind of, I don't know, Americanized knockoff. But someone else could say, well, what he's really telling you is he sees himself as a judge of what's authentic, right? So there's a certain element of boasting in the reviews about authenticity. So already you're starting to get into interesting questions about how people present themselves, and how ratings become an instrument for people's self-construction, right? So restaurant ratings. If we go down a little bit, look at this one. I hope you can read that. Operationalizing canonicity, a quantitative study of French 19th and 20th century literature. And so what this does, if you open it up and you read the abstract, is it detects underlying textual dynamics that grant certain works exceptional longevity while jeopardizing the transmission of the majority. Or in other words, they use a statistical model to read the books that are thought to be part of the canon or the collection of great works in French literature from the 19th and 20th century. They compare all these things to things that are not to themselves and then to things that are not in the canon. And they discover predictive outcomes with accuracy ranging from 70 to 74%. In other words, they discover what this scholar, Altieri, has called a cultural grammar. Or in other words, there is something going on in these works. They share certain features that set them apart. It's not just kind of somehow that they're written by important people or that it's all random chance. Actually, if when you have a computer do something that probably no human being could do, which is to extremely carefully and systematically read all the works in the canon from 200 years, you discover that they share certain structural and linguistic features. So just from those two examples, uh, a, a statistical analysis of 200 years of canonical French literature and a statistical analysis of the reviews in the language used in restaurant reviews, you get a sense of the breadth, the wide range of what's going on in cultural analytics. Kind of cool, right? I mean, quite interesting and quite, you know, quite fresh with respect to the sorts of, you know, humanistic papers and projects that are typically going on in the humanities classroom. Like this is something different, not altogether different, um, but substantially different, right? Okay. I think that's probably enough about cultural analytics for now. I'm just, I mean, what we're doing in this course is just sort of like to use the restaurant metaphor, we're seeking an authentic and amazing sampler plate of all the different things that are going on, or many of the different things that are going on in the cultural humanities. So often we'll just sort of have a taste of this and a taste of that, and then it'll be time to move on. In the second video this week, I'll talk a little bit about data mining and give some examples of that.